Run, river, run, run through the hills. Run, river, run to the sea. Run, river, run to your place beneath the sun. Run, river, run over me. Run.
Hi, this is Jan Lewis. Welcome today to be my guest. We have Owen Sholes, and Owen is the author of the book Stopping by Woods, Robert Frost as New England Naturalist. Now, I was sharing with Owen that my father loved Robert Frost poems. In fact, at his funeral, I read The Road Less Traveled, right? Yes. Yeah, I read that one. Did you design the cover?
No, the publisher did that, and I give them all the credit.
Well, yeah, it could have. Now, Owen is also a retired professor from Assumption College, zoology, ecology, evolution, and I love this preface. Why would an ecologist write about Robert Frost? It's all yours.
Well, I figured that some people would have that question.
Yeah.
And it turns out because Robert Frost was a very skilled naturalist, that many of the things that show up in his poetry, his observations and descriptions of the countryside, of the farms and so forth, is something that I'm fairly familiar with. Actually, my graduate school research overlapped with one of his poems, Design. It starts off, I found a dippled spider, fat and white, on a white heel while holding up a moth. I spent a lot of time looking at insects and spiders on flowers, and I have seen that actually happen. Not on that particular plant, but on other things.
Yeah.
So, and that's it says, hey, there's a connection here. Okay. And then I think it was in 2007 I heard an interview with Robert Fagan, who's at the Claremont McKenna College. He had just transcribed all of Frost's notebooks, and he was being interviewed at a Boston station, and he quoted Frost as saying, all life is cellular.
Yeah.
And I said, oh, that sounds interesting.
Yeah.
So I got the notebooks, and I began to go through the notebooks, the poetry, the prose, and to look for biological references. And the good part was most of the references were what he would call natural history, ecology, environmental history, things that I'm most familiar with.
Oh, yeah.
And then it turned out that after looking at the whole body of the work, there's actually a narrative in there, somewhat hidden, of environmental change from roughly the time of European settlement, the colonists first getting here, till the early 20th century. A lot of things were happening on the landscape. First, people made farms carved them out of the forest. And then,
what did he call them? The stone walls? He has a poem about that, right?
Yes, the mending wall and walls show up.
Good walls make good neighbors? What's that?
Fences make good
neighbors, yeah.
And even though in my house we had bad fences with our horse, but we were still good neighbors.
You have a horse?
We did.
Okay.
And it kept getting out. But once people started trying to plow the land, they ran all the rocks and they had to put them somewhere. Yeah. And once there were multiple property owners, you stacked them at the boundary between the farms, and that's how the walls came to be.
Yeah.
The tonnage of stone was immense.
Where did they get all of this? I grew up in a home that we had a huge stone wall. It was there before we got there.
Right. Well, it was just while they were plowing, the stones are going to break your plow, so you get them out of there. But a lot of them are really heavy, and so you have to use the oxen to drag them, and then you get them out of the way.
Yeah.
That's the main thing. And it was a huge amount of effort. And now you see trees have grown up around the walls because around the middle of the 1800s, agriculture was being abandoned as people moved west to get better farmland or moved into cities to work in the increasing industry. So the farms, nobody wanted to buy the farms, so they were just abandoned. But nobody would move the stone walls. And the stone foundations are still there, but the houses burned down, rotted, collapsed.
I've seen stone foundations. Not so much the cement ones, but the stone ones.
The stone ones linger. They do fill in eventually. If they're level with the land, they fill in. And Frost writes about all this stuff. He writes about farming and various facets of it, and then abandoning the farms And then the thing that struck him most was, well, there were two things. It was really sad that people were leaving the land, so friendships were being broken, families were pulled apart. So he bemoaned the loss of people. But when the land was left untended, things grew back. Animals moved in, and that fascinated him. And he especially liked flowers, which were some of the first things to come in on an abandoned farm. And he really liked birch trees.
Yeah.
Not all trees, because some of the trees would shade out the flowers, but the birch trees with their white bark were one of his favorite things. And they grow only in sunny areas. So this is a pretty standard ecological succession stuff that he's talking about, that the trees will come in and you'll have this beautiful white bark. He talks about swinging on them, occasionally cutting them down, but he really admired the white bark.
Have you always been interested in Robert Frost?
For a very long time, but it's been about 12 years since I really got into this in a detailed way. So.
Was this your major in college when you went? Did you go to Assumption?
No, I went to Carleton College in Minnesota, which is where I read the poem Design.
Yeah.
So I grew up in the Midwest, but after graduate school, at Cornell, I got a job at Assumption, and so I've been here ever since. Well, of course, I retired last year.
But you're still teaching, right? No?
I'm teaching part-time right now, and in fact, I'm teaching a course I call Environmental History of New England. Which,
you bringing this up? You bring your book up with them?
I bring up the poetry.
Yeah.
I'm not going to force them to buy the book because.
Why not? Put it right there. See this? See this?
Yes, yeah, you need this.
Yeah.
But we talk about a lot of the things that are in the book.
Yeah.
Other things too, but a lot of this.
Stopping by Woods. Robert Frost as New England Naturalist by our guest Owen D.V. Sholes. The connection you made, again, my father would have been fascinated between what you love, the zoology, the biology, the ecology, all that type of thing, environmental, with his poems. I mean, his poems are obviously very, very much oriented that way.
Yes,
and that's how you actually, you relate with him. And
Yeah.
this comes across. Now, I was looking at his table of contents. Subduing the land, teams that came by the stony road. What's that all about?
The quotes all come from one of his poems, "The Need of Being Versed in Country Things."
Yeah.
So that describes a farm where the house burned down, but the barn is still there. So he's lamenting that no more will the teams come along by the stony road. There's no more hay being cut. There's no more hay being stored in the barn. There's no more animals around to haul it. So that's not happening anymore. That's what's missing. The family is long gone. Who knows why they left? Did they leave because of the fire? Did they leave? Did it burn after they left? That's unspoken. We don't know. But all those quotes are from that poem because we see the transition. We see the basically from farm to forest, which is a big deal in New England. Really, farming used to cover somewhere between 50% and 90% of a town,
Sure.
and now it's much less. Shall we say? The Boston Globe had a headline. The woods are lovely, dark and back.
Yeah.
Another Frost illusion.
Oh, and how do people get a copy of your book?
Well, you can get it through the publisher, McFarland Books, and that's they have a website, and you can get it either way. You can get a paperback version, hard copy, so-called, from Amazon and other sellers, and there are electronic copies available as well.
So you're also on the electronic.
Yes. So this is. I will just say the electronic copies are certainly cheaper. But
I don't care. I like this best.
The index in the electronic copies, the index doesn't work. The index is just a list of words. So if you like indexes, and then you want to get the hard version.
Now there'll be a copy downstairs. Am I correct?
I already left one. At the library.
Right at the Upton Library. Come on down. Stopping by Woods. Robert Frost as New England Naturalist. Our guest Owen Sholes wrote this book, and Owen is retired professor from Assumption, zoology, ecology, and evolution. Let's see. Brush the mow with the summer load.
Oh, this is a bit. That's a line from the same poem, "The Need of Being Versed in Country Things." But there are two ways you could look at it. When they cut hay, they piled it on a wagon and then hauled it to the barn. So the cut stubble might be viewed as the mow, but the hay was drooping off the side, so it would brush that. Or if they're talking about the hay mow, which is the loft, so then they're tossing the hay up into the loft of the barn to be stored for the winter. So that's yet another thing, but that's another thing that's not happening anymore on this farm. So
Mow, when I see M-O-W, I think mow the lawn.
yes, but it turns out to have multiple meanings and even multiple pronunciations. What I'd like to find, I haven't found it yet, but I'd like to have a recording of Frost reading it to see how he pronounces it. If he pronounces it mow, then I think the first view is correct, that is what's going on out in the hay meadow. If he says mow, then he's talking about tossing it up into the...
How would you go about finding a recording of that?
Apparently more and more are becoming available, and you simply have to look online. And most of them right now that are easily accessible, I think, are just the more well-known poems. And so you can find them, but I haven't tracked this one down yet, but I think an archive like the Amherst College Library or Dartmouth College, even the University of Virginia, these places have a lot of his notebooks in their archives. They might also have some recordings.
Agrarian, this is another chapter. Agrarian diaspora. Did I say that right?
Well, diaspora.
Diaspora, from too much dwelling on what has been.
This is the people leaving. And so so the diaspora is just everything going out and just dispersing.
Yeah.
So some people, some botanists will call seeds and spores diaspores, meaning that they're built for spreading the plant around a little bit. Anyway, so but people were leaving the farms and going somewhere, leaving the land, and as people pointed out, the population was sort of, the rural population peaked about 1830, 1850, and it didn't reach that same population density in the rural part of Massachusetts until the 1980s. So people left and they didn't come back right away. It's taken a while for people to repopulate the small towns. So they were leaving, and so the human viewpoint from this deserted farm is sort of too much dwelling on what has been. But as you get to the second half of the poem, what happens to the barn is that the window is broken and it allows birds to get in, and so they're nesting in the barn. So they are rejoicing in the nest they kept. And these are phoebes, one of the common flycatchers around here.
Life cycles in a resurgent nature. For them, there was really nothing sad.
Yeah, that's for the birds.
Yeah.
For them, there was really nothing sad about the abandonment of this farm, because they now have a place to live.
It's a win-win situation. The people maybe moved on to something better, and the birds got a place to live.
It could be. It could be that the people have decided this wasn't where they were going to succeed, so let's move to, I don't know, Iowa, or let's move to Worcester, or some city where we can have sustained employment and not have to deal with the hardships of running a farm.
Ecological succession. They rejoiced in the nest they kept.
Yeah,
That's about the same thing.
Yeah, so the phoebes are a bird that actually likes to hang around people, but it tends to do really well in nesting in dwellings. We have friends in Hubbardston who have a nest right outside their back door every year, and they have to be a little cautious coming in and out as the nestlings are there. Eventually, they will get to the point where they can leave the nest. They will fledge, and off they go.
That's what happened to where, at my home. You go out the back door and up in the eaves over the steps. Now, I'm wondering, are they going to come back? It's like a condo. Are you going to come back to your condo or what?
Sometimes they do.
They do?
And we have a phoebe nest in our woodshed, and they use it most years.
They come back.
Yeah, and now are they the same birds? I have no idea.
What's the odds of them coming back, do you think?
Well, these birds live somewhere several years. I don't know exactly what their lifespan is. Yeah. They do migrate south because there aren't too many insects for them to catch in the winter. Yeah. So they do have to remember where if they are going to find the nest, they have to be able to navigate not only to the general area of New England, but specifically to that site. But they seem to do pretty well doing that.
Owen, when I think about this book, this is pretty recent. Didn't you get this out last year, right?
Yes.
Okay. With your job as a professor and all that going on, What made you decide to write this book?
Well, one of the perks of being a professor is every once in a while they give you a sabbatical. So you have a time to sit down and do a project, some sort of scholarly work. And in the past, I spent a year out in Arizona working on the insects that fed on pinyon pine trees out there, and published a few papers from that work. But as I say, right before I had a sabbatical coming up, I heard that interview with Robert Fagan and said, this is something I want to pursue. So I proposed this. What do you think? I think I can get something out of this. I thought there might be a book in there. I've never written a book before, but for some reason, some irrational reason, I thought maybe I could get a book out of this. And they said, sure, okay. So I spent a year, let's see, when was it, 2012, 2013, actually writing it. And then after that, revision, sending it out to various publishers to see what they want. And they eventually, after some reworking into the environmental history theme, which is what it has now, McFarland picked it up. So the publishing is kind of an adventure, I discovered, but it's fun.
Yeah. What made you go through somebody and not do it self-publishing?
Well, I thought that I didn't know enough about self-publishing to do it myself. It didn't seem like I would have to do too many things about which I knew essentially nothing.
Okay.
I knew something about the content, but the how to put it together and how to doing all the graphics and doing getting the text. I said,
Owen, where have you appeared talking about your book?
Well, just a few places. Well, I've talked about this topic several times. I've talked at Assumption College. I went to a conference and actually went to a conference in France. That was fun. And I have did a reading at Bedlam Books.
Where's that?
That's a used bookstore in Worcester.
A used bookstore?
Yes, and it's it's a store with used books, shall we say?
Okay, but it's got new books too, right?
It may have some, but I think they specialize in used books. They also have a little snack bar.
But how on
and they're
earth?
in the same building as Birch Tree
Yours is still
Bakery.
a new book. How?
Yes.
Why?
Well, they give readings to authors.
Okay, so you could appear there.
So
Okay.
I was allowed in, even though my book was new. So
Did you like it?
it was fun. We had a small crowd and mostly people I knew.
Yeah. So that was cool.
So we had a nice conversation.
Anything coming up over the summer?
Well, a former colleague of mine is living near Hudson, Mass. I don't know exactly what town she's in, but she's invited me to her retirement residence, so I'm going to do a reading there in June.
Yeah.
And then beyond that, I'm open to any invitations.
How can they reach you again, Owen?
Well, they can reach me through my email, which is osholes@assumption.edu.
No, that's SHOLES.
Yeah, OSHOLES at assumption.edu. So if people want to contact me, they can certainly do it that way.
I was telling him my father loved Robert Frost. Stopping by Woods, Robert Frost is New England naturalist. And I read it at my father's funeral, The Road Less Traveled. Am I got that right?
Well, I think it's The Road Not Taken.
The Road Not Taken. He had that entrepreneurial spirit. And after years of the corporate type of sales thing, he left, went to Cape Cod, opened a print shop. And he tried it out. And he was maybe in his 60s. And he tried it. It was he was so devoted. Owen, he'd sleep there at night just to watch. Finally, it got to be just a lot, so he sold it to one of the men who worked for him.
Okay.
And then he went back into sales, that type of thing. But he did it. He took the leap.
Yeah, well, that was kind of what the book was. I wasn't sure what was going to happen, but once my first inclination was, well, maybe he talks about cells, maybe he talks about physiology and so forth. But it turned, I got really lucky because he talked about, most of what he talks about are things that I'm familiar with.
Yeah.
So it talks about the plant life cycles, ecological succession, which is when land is abandoned, the stuff growing back, the animals coming in. So it worked out well. I just kept going and going and going, and
Yeah.
there just was more to write about.
Oh, and we got about a minute left. Do you have another book on the offing?
I don't, but not that I'm aware of at this point. But you never know. But one thing I'd like to, and at the end of the book, I try to invite people in to become part of the narrative because often they will find their experience is pretty much the same as that of Frost, or similar, or some of the more exciting things is when it's different. You're in an area that you connect with Frost, but then you see something else. You see something he didn't see or wasn't there. He doesn't talk about, for instance, wild turkeys.
Sure.
We have turkeys everywhere now.
Yeah.
But they were really rare back then.
They'll go around. They'll make the traffic stop over this area.
Exactly.
Just
But he I don't think they were even present when he was there.
Yeah.
He doesn't talk about beavers because they still hadn't bounced back yet from having been trapped out.
Sure.
So you can connect with Frost, adding your own experience to the narrative, to this story of change in New England, from way back when people first got here to now when we're living, and who knows where this is headed.
This has been great. Owen, thanks so much for being with us.
Well,
Came
thank
all the
you
way
for
from
inviting me.
Rutland, got a little
Yes.
bit turned around, but he made it.
Lost. I did make it. I did get here in time. So
Well, this
that
is
was
you
good.
get the word out more about this book. A lot of people love Robert Frost,
Well,
and
I
your
hope so.
tie-in with the ecology.
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you so much
Thank
for being
you.
with us.
Thank
We'll
you
see you
for-
next time on Be My Guest.